One of the top prospects in the entire nation is set to visit Penn State this weekend. And for what it's worth, the Nittany Lions have just as good of a pitch as any of the other remaining schools do that are still in this recruitment.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football recruiting. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and wrestling. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us a part of your regular routine. And if you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations, the daily conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Jam-packed show around Penn State football recruiting, as it is a crossover episode. I am joining Brian Smith over on the Portal, recruiting insider and expert here on the Locked On Podcast Network, to preview this official visit weekend, talk about not only some of the Penn State prospects that are visiting, but the commitments as well, as they still go on their official visits. Which commits are being severely underrated by the recruiting rankings, and which uncommitted prospects are most likely to commit to the Nittany Lions, including five-star offensive tackle, top 5 player in the nation, Immanuel Iheanacho. We're going to discuss all of it here in this crossover episode. Enjoy.
Zach, how you doing?
Doing well, because Penn State's in position to potentially land one of the most notable players in this entire class of 2026, as you mentioned, Immanuel Iheanacho. So this is your time to leave your mark. You got to fend off, or you got to put yourself ahead of the likes of Auburn, LSU, Oregon. Those are the top 4 with Penn. Those are the top 3 in addition to Penn State. So this is the weekend to do it. This is a different weekend. It's a little more condensed because last weekend, tons of visitors. They had 18 official visits. This weekend, as we currently speak, maybe they add somebody last second, but they have 9. They have half of that. So it is an important official visit weekend, but that's why I framed it last week. I mean, that weekend was insane as far as being pivotal for this recruiting cycle.
Yeah, I agree. Let's start off with Iheanacho, since he is the discussion point that so many want to hear about. I've seen him live. He is as big as he's advertised. He's 350. Some like him at guard, some like him at tackle, but I just think he's a really good football player. I was surprised at how much he could bend and move laterally for somebody that's 350. And with his length, he's 6'6", 6'7". He can play tackle, in my opinion, no problem. But again, that will be taken care of at the college level. Oregon, LSU, they're considered, depending on who you talk to be the leaders. But, it is what it is. It's subjective. Penn State is probably next up. I think Auburn screwed their chances up last week. I don't know if you heard. They misspelled his name on the name tag. That's not going to work out very well for you.
They're done.
That's terrible. But Immanuel Iheanacho still has a very national list. I mean, Oregon, LSU, and Penn State. Can't really get much more different from 3 schools. So he's looking at programs across the country. I don't know where he's going to go at this point. I thought for the longest time it would be Oregon. Then it switched around. Then it was Maryland. Then Maryland's off the board. Yep. I've given up. When he announces, I'll know. What is the intel that you've heard on Penn State's side?
That Penn State is obviously not in a similar position, and this included Auburn as well. Look, what do LSU, Auburn, and at the time, and Oregon have in common is that they were going to make a strong, significant NIL push. And it's not to say that that's not going to be a component of Penn State's pitch, but that the Nittany Lions are going to be last in that category. Where they do lead, I would say, is in terms of likability. I mean, they've been recruiting him for the longest time. Iheanacho has been one of their prime prospects for the past before he even entered high school. They zeroed in on him immediately and started building the relationship and started that recruitment before he was actually a high school player. So there is that relationship with James Franklin and the staff and just how long they've been recruiting him. So longevity. There's the distance factor. LSU, so Louisiana, is not closer to Washington, D.C. than Penn State is. Same thing with Oregon. I don't need to explain why that is. You're flying across the country. So with Maryland out of the picture, it gives Penn State an interesting portion of the discussion where, hey, we're the local school now. Since whatever Maryland did, I don't know what they did, but they took themselves out of the mix. I thought it was going to be Iheanacho and Zion Ely. Great, good for the Terrapins, but they messed that up. So now Penn State adds that to their arsenal in this conversation where they can say, hey, we are the local school. We'll be close enough to home where there's still a little bit of distance. It's a 3-4 hour drive, but we're still there for friends and family to come watch you play. Penn State can, I'm not going to say they don't make these guarantees, but with 4 of the 5 projected starting offensive linemen from this season moving on, there are plenty of openings for Iheanacho to play as a true freshman.
Oh, yeah.
Left tackle, maybe right tackle. I mean, Penn State might lose all 5. I don't know. They might lose all 5 starting, or no, technically a guard. Cooper Cousins will stay. So Iheanacho is going to start at either a left tackle, maybe right tackle, or left guard. One of them that could be in the conversation. You don't have to force him into the lineup just because he's Iheanacho. There is actually a tangible opportunity, and you can have a competition where he can earn it. Whereas Oregon and LSU might say, well, you're going to play right away by making a loose guarantee. There is an actual opening where, oh, this guy's moving on, so at least I have a better opportunity as compared to the Tigers and the Ducks. So I think Penn State has just as equivalent as an overall pitch, but when it comes to NIL, they're going to be in last place.
Well, I'm curious, like, what that is. Like, it's one thing out of the final. Again, I don't think Auburn has any shot. Penn State, LSU, and Oregon. I tell people all the time, relationships are still number one. NIL gets you in the final 3. That's my opinion. And on most of the recruits, like kids I get to talk to off the record, I can't really talk about those situations much.
Sure.
It's not really opinion. But at the end, if it's $50,000 one way or the other, and you'd much rather be at Happy Valley or Eugene, whatever it is, it's not going to matter. So Penn State's already made it to that point. To me, they're probably closer than what many, maybe even you think, because he wouldn't be taking the visit at this point because he has been all over the place in Penn State many times. So it wouldn't shock me if Iheanacho ended up at Penn State, but we'll see. I need to see his announcement to believe anything at this point because his leader has changed so much.
That's fair. That's kind of, and I feel the exact same way. I would naturally assume that it's still Oregon's recruiting battle to lose, but yeah. I would not be floored if Penn State ends up with Iheanacho in this class. I wouldn't. I loosely expect it, but again, if he goes to Oregon, even if he goes to LSU, it stings because, hey, this is another chance for Penn State to land make a name for themselves and say we're in this elite category too. We're not in the second tier. This is the moment where you can gain ground for that stigma.
What about Brian Bonner? He's one of my favorite players in this class, regardless of position. Mm-hmm. Is he coming this weekend? Is that accurate? The list I'm looking at, that's Valencia, California running back. Because what's the situation with him? Is Penn State still in that recruitment, and are they after him? Because I love him as a player.
I haven't heard anything different, but these change so rapidly. We're going to talk about a prospect that was just added this week. So, and then one of the first official visit weekends, the roster was changed over the official visit roster. So there were players that were supposed to be there, and then there were players that were subtracted. So it could change at any given moment. And he is making a long trip from California. I've talked about this one with our counterpart over at Locked On Huskies, Roman, and I mean, Penn State is in the mix here. Would I say that they are a leading contender? Probably not. UCLA is in his backyard. I think he's made tons. I know that he's made tons of visits there, and he's roughly 30 miles, give or take, from the Bruins. And Deshaun Foster, being a former running back, certainly helps. I would imagine that he ends up there, especially with where UCLA's running back room is. But Penn State's probably going to try to make a push here. If and when they have him on campus, if this holds true past this conversation, which at this point in time, it looks that way, Bonner is certainly a coveted prospect and certainly somebody that, well, they already have Messiah Mickens in the class of, hey, Jay-One Sider's not giving up at Notre Dame. And I keep hearing different intel that, Mickens is all in on Penn State. He's verbally expressed that he's shut down that all of his other visits. But then Notre Dame and Jay-One Sider just continue to push. So I just keep hearing mixed intel about, hey, Mickens is all in on Penn State. Notre Dame is actually still trying to make a push, and they feel pretty good about his recruitment. So I will leave it at that. If Penn State does feel some type of way, if they lose any sort of confidence that Mickens would happen to flip, I don't see why you don't make an even stronger push for someone like Brian Bonner. So if that is the case, Penn State likes to take 2 running backs every single cycle. If you are worried that you might not even get one, then I think you push all your eggs into a basket and try to go get Bonner and try to keep him away from UCLA, Washington. Easier said than done, though. Same thing we say about Iheanacho going to Oregon. Well, you got to make that same pitch to Bonner coming all the way from California.
When we come back on this crossover, Locked On Penn State and Locked On the Portal, we got more official visits to talk about. And I'm also going to ask Zach which guys he thinks they got the best chance at getting a commitment. That is next here on this crossover edition.
And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, spending, all in one place. So you stop just managing your money. You start building wealth. You get surprising insights. When I started using Monarch for myself, I realized just how much I was spending on things like subscriptions or package deliveries, groceries. Now I get to budget smarter and save more. You get the all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, even plan long-term goals. And you'll get easy collaboration moving forward. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for, get this, 50% off your first year. That's right, 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year.
All right, Zach, before we go on with the official visit list, anybody, whether last weekend, this weekend, maybe somebody that visited in May. Penn State had a couple guys come in that month too, quite a few actually. Who's most likely to commit to Penn State next, if you had to venture a guess, or at least 2 or 3 that are possibilities?
Yeah, I would say that it's a little tough to say because it's just a matter of timeline. I would say the most confident prospect or who I could project to Penn State would be Luke Wafle. So it's kind of that's
really good player.
That's top 100 conservatively top 50 overall in the nation. His older brother's Owen Wafle. He's a defensive tackle that transferred into Penn State from Michigan. Kind of the same thing that I mentioned with Iheanacho about how Penn State just has had a long-standing relationship. So that extends to the entire family, the entire Wafle family. That is Penn State's recruiting battle to lose. So I would circle Luke Wafle as a player that they've just been targeting for such a long time. It's a matter of when, not if. I am not guaranteeing that. That is my opinion. Again, they're going up against the likes of Florida, Texas. We've seen in the past where Florida will make a significant NIL offer out of nowhere to a prospect here and there, not even affiliated with Penn State, but Penn State did happen to have that happen to them from the Gators not too long ago, a couple cycles ago. So it is possible that they could do that again. In short, Luke Wafle is the guy that I circle for Penn State as somebody that will commit relatively soon in the future. As far as anybody else, remember, Joey O'Brien's on commitment watch in 7 to 8 days. He didn't visit recently, but that's Penn State's one of his top schools. And the quote reads from Joey O'Brien that James Franklin will not let me leave the state of Pennsylvania. I'm watching that one closely. I'm watching Kari Adams too. And Dorian Barney, someone that I kind of, because of how many defensive backs, Brian, that Penn State's taken to this point in time, I kind of said, okay, if Penn State's prioritizing Joey O'Brien, Kari Adams, somebody's got to be out of the mix, right? Dorian Barney was just kind of the logical conclusion that I came to, but he's really high on Penn State still. I think it's down to Texas A&M and Penn State. So if Penn State's going to be able to convince 8-9 defensive backs to join the class in 2026, I'm all for it. The more the merrier when they run this 4-2-5. it's been a really impressive cycle for Anthony Poindexter and Terry Smith, to say the least, with all the juggling that they've done to this point in time, to be able to balance all of that. Right now, you have 6, and you're in the mix and could land all 3, which would put you at 9 defensive backs in 2026.
Brayden Fogle. This is a kid I've started to learn more about. Lexington High School in Mansfield, Ohio. Flex tight end, 6'3", 225, could play some H-back, could play fullback, do a little bit of everything. Really athletic kid. His visit list and the schools that are in on him is kind of a who's who. Ole Miss, Notre Dame, LSU, Georgia, Penn State. That's pretty broad. Some big names. What have you heard about Penn State with him, and have they been recruiting him for an extended period of time?
So he's been a late riser from what I've gathered. Again, he's not on 3. He has due respect 24/7, but Rivals, and I know on 3 and Rivals are merging. So, I want to be careful how I conflate the rankings and everything, but he's listed as a 3-star and I think very underrated. He's insanely athletic, but a player that when they've been recruiting other tight ends, Max Sutter, Luke Sorensen, for example, that's the direction that I thought they were going to go in. Penn State's in an intriguing spot because they took 3 tight ends in the class of 2025. And Luke Reynolds and Andrew Rapplier are going to be around for a couple more seasons at a minimum. If they break out, they could go into the NFL draft and forego that remaining eligibility. But they're still young players within the program. It's not like they're getting ready to leave after this season. So Penn State doesn't really have a lot of room in the tight end room. I would not be surprised if they don't take a tight end period just because it's too crowded. It's too crowded. But from the individual himself, Fogle is an intriguing prospect. I don't want to make the comparison. It's difficult. I just don't like doing it, but I'll do it for the sake of the conversation. Reminds me of Theo Johnson, just athleticism.
Oh, okay.
Very good receiver. Like you said, he can block too. So I like that. I think that comparison is fair between the two. But yeah, they're going up against Georgia, Ohio State. So despite Rivals having that 3-star ranking, they do their own scouting. So I'll believe the schools that are after these prospects. That is how I make my recruiting evaluations of, are they a 5-star? Are they a 4-star? Are they a 3-star? Because Georgia would not be going after an unranked or a lowly rated 3-star.
No, especially from the north. Drew Evers is an offensive tackle from the greater Dallas area, Flower Mound. It's a prominent program, has been for a long time. How many O-linemen does Penn State want in this class? We don't have to really dive into Evers that much, but they want 4, they want 5. How many do they want?
I mean, they're looking to try to take 4 or 5 because, like I said, there is that turnover where aside from Cooper Cousins, you are going to lose 4 starters, almost all but guaranteed. Again, the jury's out. What does Anthony Donko go into the NFL draft? Does he return for another season? Because Penn State's been really good at roster retention. So they're most likely Penn State will lose guaranteed 3, possibility of 4. With that being said, Penn State definitely wants to load up on offensive linemen because you need depth. And people that Penn State, why they're able to be a clear-cut national title contender is because of not only the starting offensive line that they were able to return and retain this season, it's the depth behind them. It's the insurance that you have. Javen Williams is a former 5-star, a former top 10 prospect, I think, in the nation. He was definitely the number 1 overall prospect in the state of Pennsylvania, is a backup still. He's not start. He could start in theory, but there's just guys that are better suited than him at this given moment, but there isn't a drop off if he would have to go in. And that's just one player that I could name. Former 4-star Alex Birchmeyer was a top 1 conservatively, a top 100 player. Once upon a time, Penn State has the depth, but you are going to lose some of that depth going into next season. You need to load up again in the class of 2026.
Let's talk a little bit about a guy that's been a late ad for Penn State. And I don't know a ton about him, but Tabor Academy up in Marion, Massachusetts, they've had players for a long time. Defensive lineman is Carter Gooden, 6'4", 260. It's official visit list, if it's correct. Michigan State, Virginia, Penn State, North Carolina, Boston College. To me, that looks like a slam dunk for Penn State. But have the Nittany Lions been in on him for a long time, or are they in on him later? What's the circumstance for the Nittany Lions?
Similar instance as, you being the nationwide recruiting expert here. if this is somebody that just, hey, it's I recognize him now, but I haven't recognized him for a long time. At Penn State, kind of a similar situation. He's just been a late riser in the recruiting rankings, or at least in terms of his overall recruiting profile. Just based on what I've seen from some high school, huddle highlights and everything else, he is a take, but the competition is questionable. But we've made this argument for the guys that they've taken from Delaware: Jasir Rogers, Isaac Chukara. Well, they don't play competition, so that's why they're lowly rated 3 stars. But then you put them against comparable competition, and they're more or less dominant. Chukara just won an MVP at an all-22 camp, and Jasir Rogers finally got the respect that he deserves, and he's in your top 12 list for slot wide receivers in the entire country. So high school competition doesn't necessarily make or break Penn State's decision, but they do need some proof. They need to back this up. With this official visit, they're going to interview him. They're going to test him. They're going to see, some competitions, I imagine, or just how he goes through drills. And this Penn State's his best option at this point in time in terms of overall interest. If they say, we want you to commit, and he's willing to shut down all of his other official visits, I could see him being a Penn State commit sooner rather than later. But it's kind of a step and go type of situation where he has to test well. This weekend is pivotal for Carter Gooden himself. If he wants to commit to the Nittany Lions, he has to prove that he's worth it to Penn State.
I can see that. The competition up there is iffy, but that's a program that's been good for a long time, and he's got the right frame. He's a big-bodied kid. He could probably grow into a 3-tech, and we both know those are hard to find, and Penn State needs him. So when we come back, we're going to break down the rest of the list and talk a little bit more about Penn State's recruiting needs here on this crossover, Locked on Penn State and Locked on the Portal. All right, thank you once again for making Locked on the Portal or Locked on Penn State your first listens each and every day. We truly appreciate it. Zach, Penn State's recruiting list this weekend, as you noted earlier, is a little bit smaller, a little more focus. Is there any position that you think just overall they need to knock out, whether it's somebody from this weekend or one of the others, combination? What position is most important for the Nittany Lions to finish out the 26 class strong?
They've done a phenomenal job as far as going after needs. They're not chasing prospects. They're not settling. I just had an episode talking about, Penn State has a bunch of 3 stars in this recruiting cycle. They are 4 stars. The recruiting rankings are just behind. And honestly, I mean, you could make an argument that just about every single prospect in Penn State's class this time around is slightly better than what the rankings are giving them credit for. For example, Kevin Brown, you could make the argument as a 5-star. He's a high-end 4-star, but I could see him being a 5-star. Guys that are 3 stars, they are 4 stars. They play like it anyway. You have to watch the tape and you'll see for yourself. But Penn State has 2 quarterbacks, a running back. Right. They could potentially add Bonner. They have 3 wide receivers, no tight ends, but because, hey, if you really want to break it up, you have 3 in the class of 2025. That's why you have what you have in 2026. So, if they don't get a tight end, that's what they need. No, because of what they did in the previous cycle. Offensive line, they're doing well. You can't have enough defensive linemen. You really can't. You need depth there in the trenches. The same argument that I make for O-line, you certainly need it for the defensive line. I would like to see Penn State maybe add another solid linebacker if I had to pick any position group. They're done in the secondary. I say that as they're still, but they have 6 prospects already. And if they miss out on Joey O'Brien, I'd be upset. If I'm Penn State, if they miss out on Kari Adams, I'd be upset. And/or Dorian Barney. You need to at least land one of them at a very minimum. So that's where I'd say Penn State's goals are. Add another linebacker prospect that's solid, not really necessarily a long-term project type of prospect. Somebody that, hey, could play sooner rather than later. Solid 4-star with a high-end ceiling. Easier said than done in terms of in this recruiting cycle. And then get the prospects that you have circled on your big board. Joey O'Brien, Luke Wafle, Kari Adams. Just get those priorities, and I don't have any complaints about this recruiting class. You got 2 quarterbacks, for crying out loud. That's unheard of at this point in time with where we are in terms of NIL and the transfer portal.
What about Carter Meadows? That's the other kid that Like, he's just really good.
He's a priority, just generally. I mean, he's a priority for everybody. Michigan, we've talked about it before. Michigan feels good about his recruitment. Same thing with Ohio State. Penn State did make a strong push. I would say that they increased their chances, but again, I'm erring on the side of I'll take the group, I'll take the field as opposed to Penn State in his recruitment. I would just be slightly more surprised if they do land this one because of who we're talking about. Hey, they can't take everybody, right? If they're going after Carter Gooden, if they're going after Luke Wafle, if they're going after some other edge defenders, Penn State, that's why I'm so surprised that they're carrying 6 defensive backs as it is and are strongly in the mix for 3 more. I just don't know how they're balancing it. So just logically, I don't know how many more defensive linemen Penn State can take with already what they have. So, but that's my opinion. Penn State, Deion Barnes, that's his job to balance it all and be able to convince them that, hey, just because it's crowded doesn't mean anything. This is where you can develop the best.
All right, let's break down just a couple more kids here that are coming in. Terry Wiggins, kid that's committed from Coatesville, Pennsylvania. Speaking of linebackers, he doesn't give much love. That's a good player. Got some length to him. And I'm going to probably mispronounce this name. Benjamin Eziuka from Catholic Central in Novi, Michigan, offensive lineman, committed to Penn State recently. He's another kid Penn State's high on, probably center or guard. They've also got Luke Sorensen coming in from Servite. That's a really good program out in L.A., tight end. And then Charlie Thom, another kid from up in the Northeast, an offensive tackle, 6'6", 275. They've got a nice little mix of players coming in from all over the country, California to Connecticut. It really doesn't get much broader than that. So anything that you want to add to what's left with Penn State's official visit list, anything you know about these young men?
I like Terry Wiggins a lot. This isn't your average lower end 4-star player. This was Penn State, one of Penn State's priorities at linebacker. Dan Connor came in with the initiative that Terry Wiggins was going to be I think this was one of the players that was higher on their big board overall. So they took care of that commitment. Extremely athletic. And something else that I've noticed with Penn State and linebackers, they're taking height. Amari Campbell, somebody that they took from the portal, and no complaints. Well, he's 5'11", he's 6 foot, right? But somebody that's 6'3" could end up being 6'4". That's a tall middle linebacker, or an off ball. He could play either. I see him more as an off ball linebacker, of course. Somebody that would most likely redshirt to add that weight because he's currently listed 6'3", 205, but he's got really good speed for a linebacker, reads plays very well. So active in coverage, really good in run defense, of course, which is what you need when you're targeting a linebacker. But this was the guy that Penn State prioritized right from the get-go, and they got his commitment. As far as just to familiarize everybody, they took Eziuka was in one of those situations where they wanted to see him in person. How do you test? How do you interview? Are you somebody that fits culturally? And that's why it was such a quick turnaround. I heard some rumors that, hey, they're going to get a commitment soon from this. And then it happened overnight, almost, it seems like. So I saw his rating got bumped up by ESPN. So he's a 4-star according to ESPN. I think he's still a consensus 3-star. But again, Penn State doesn't take commitments on accident. They don't view these prospects as 3 stars because if they did, they wouldn't take their commitment. They view them as players that can develop and long-term can be really, really good with the right training, coaching, etc. How does this player project if he has the right coaching, the right resources, the team of nutritionists, right? It's all those things. How would they project at Penn State? That's what they're going off of. As far as Charlie Thom's intriguing because he's insanely athletic. He was playing a little tight end at his high school. A former teammate, Owen Alasini, committed to Penn State in a similar situation. We're just really athletic player. Definitely needs to go through a redshirt period, add some weight. Alasini, from what I've heard and what I've seen, is doing well in his first season at Penn State. He's not going to play this season. Things go wrong, he will. But that's kind of a similar situation to his former high school teammate. If he committed to Penn State, give him the right coaching, the right resources, he could turn into a very athletic offensive tackle for them. So I like who Penn State has in this official visit list. It's condensed in comparison to and the premier prospects between Wafle and Meadows and everybody else the weekend before. It's tough to compare and contrast. It's almost apples to oranges, but Iheanacho, extremely important. Bonner, in the scheme of things, if Penn State does feel like Mickens may flip to Notre Dame, even though I still think he stays committed, you still want that 2 running backs. And like I said, there's a lot of upside with Carter Gooden. You get to continue to build that relationship with Wiggins and Eziuka and, make a strong impression on some of these other uncommitted prospects. So it's still an important weekend, but tough to compare it to last week.
Oh, that's fair. Zach, that's a lot of information. I appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can find your work.
Same as you, all over on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Same over on X for any takes outside of the show. And we talk about Penn State daily.
Absolutely. Same thing with the portal, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your pods. We can see you all kinds of different situations. We're doing crossovers with Penn State, Notre Dame, you name it. We're going to be doing it. It's a lot of fun here on the Portal Podcast. Get all your latest recruiting information. We will see you again soon.